Yes, I am Chris Guld. I'm from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, but now I live permanently on here with my husband Jim. And if you're wondering which Jim, it's the mustache Jim. And I did live in Anchorage from 1959 to 66. That was grades 1 through 7 for me, and I was there in the 1964 Great Alaskan Earthquake, and I absolutely will tell you about that. But first, I have to tell you some other memories of Alaska. There are strange things done in the midnight sun by the men who moil for gold. The Arctic trails have their secret tales that would make your blood run cold. The Northern Lights have seen queer sights, but the queerest they ever did see was that night on the marge of Lake Labarge. I cremated Sam McGee. Now, Sam McGee was from Tennessee, where the cotton blooms and blows. Why he left his home in the South to roam around the poles, God only knows. He was always cold, but the land of gold seemed to hold him like a spell. Though he'd often say, in his homely way, he'd rather live in hell. On a Christmas day, we were mushing our way over the Dawson Trail. Talk of your cold. Through the parka's fold, it drove like a driven nail, stabbed like a driven nail. If our eyes we'd close, our lashes froze so we couldn't even see. It wasn't much fun, but the only one to whimper was Sam McGee. And that very night, as we lay packed tight in our robes beneath the snow, and the dogs were fed and the stars overhead were dancing heel and toe, he turned to me and said, "Chris," said he, "I'll cash in this trip, I guess. And if I do, I'm asking you to grant my last request." Well, he seemed so low, I couldn't say no. Then he says with a sort of moan, "It's the cursed cold, and it's got right hold till I'm chilled through to the bone. Yet 'tain't being dead is my awful dread. It's the icy grave that pains. So I want you to swear that foul or fair, you'll cremate my last remains." Okay. A pal's last need is a thing to heed, so I swore I would not fail, and we started on at the streak of dawn. But God, he looked ghastly pale. He crouched on the sleigh, and he raved all day of his home in Tennessee. Before nightfall, a corpse was all that was left of Sam McGee. There wasn't a breath in that land of death, and I drove on, horror-driven, with a corpse half hid that I couldn't get rid because of a promise given. It was lashed to the sleigh, and it seemed to say, "You can tax your brawn and brains, but you promised true, and it's up to you to cremate those last remains." Now, a promise made is a debt unpaid, and the trail has its own stern code. In the days to come, though my lips were dumb, in my heart how I cursed that load. In the long, long night by the low firelight, while the huskies round in a ring howled out their woes to the homeless snows, God, how I loathed that thing. And every day that quiet clay seemed to heavy and heavier grow, and on I went, though the dogs were spent and the grub was getting low. The trail was bad and I felt half mad, but I swore I would not give in. And I often sing to the hateful thing, and it hearkened with a grin, till I came to the marge of Lake Labarge, and a derelict there lay. It was stuck in the ice, but I saw in a trice it was named the Alice May. I looked at it, and I thought a bit, and I looked at my frozen chum, and there, said I, with a sudden cry, is my crematorium. Some planks I tore from the cabin floor and lit the boiler fire. Some coal I found that was laying around, and I heaped the fuel higher. The flames just soared and the furnace roared, such a blaze you never did see. And I burrowed a hole in the glowing coal, and I stuffed in Sam McGee. Then I took a hike, for I didn't like to hear him sizzle so. And the heavens scowled, and the huskies howled, and the wind began to blow. And it was icy cold, but the hot sweat rolled down my cheeks, and I don't know why. The greasy smoke in an inky cloak went streaking down the sky. I do not know how long in the snow I've wrestled with grisly fear, but the stars came out and danced about ere again I ventured near. I was sick with dread, but I bravely said, I'll just take a peek inside. I guess he's cooked, and it's time I looked. And the door I opened wide, and there sat Sam, looking cool and calm in the heart of the furnace roar. And he wore a smile, you could see a mile, and he said, please close that door. It's fine in here, but I greatly fear that you'll let in this cold and storm. Since I left Plumtree in Tennessee, it's the first time I've been warm. There are strange things done in the midnight sun by the men who moil for gold. The Arctic trails have their secret tales that'll make your blood run cold. The Northern Lights have seen queer sights, but the queerest they ever did see was that night on the marge of Lake Labarge. I cremated Sam McGee. How many of you have heard that poem before? Oh, good. At least there's several. It blows me away that there's anybody who hasn't.
Yeah, really.
Being a kid in Alaska, that's just ingrained in, that is the poem of Alaska. It's by Robert Service. He was known for lots of Alaska poetry. And I just love that because also I was born in Tennessee. And I could not get warm in Alaska. So here is a sled dog team, such as might be carrying Sam McGee's corpse. This happened to be a photo that my family took, though, of the sled dog races that happen every year in Anchorage. I also had a sled dog. His name was Eskimo. Anybody figure out where that comes from? Eskimo? Eskimo. And sometimes he had blue eyes, sometimes he had brown eyes, sometimes he had one blue eye and one brown eye. It's one of the features of Alaskan Huskies. What was I doing in Alaska? I was born in Memphis, Tennessee, to a Navy father who then got transferred to Honolulu. That marriage didn't work out, according to my mom, so she took me and went back to her folks who lived in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, where she met my stepfather, who said, I want to get as far away from your parents as possible. So we moved to Seattle, Washington, and there heard so much about good jobs and adventures in Alaska that we had to go and check it out. Look at that route. That's over 2,000 miles. Most all of it dirt gravel road. And my mom kept a journal. I just want to read you a little piece of it. It was day 6 of this journey. At 11:30, we went to sleep. You all understand that now, right? It does not get dark It actually doesn't get completely dark at all, but a little bit dusk, about 11:30. 11:30, we went to sleep. First time we were able to sleep out of doors in the sleeping bags. Wonderful, heavenly light sleep. Woke at 9, tried fishing off the island. Chris fell in coming back across the stepping stones. So I read that line and I thought, oh, next she's going to say, I was so worried I went and grabbed her and took care of her. No, all she writes is, ha! Tells you a little bit about how I was raised. Didn't get around to leaving our best camp till 1 p.m. So nice. 6 p.m. July 24, crossed into Alaska and onto paved road. After traveling 2,000 miles on dry creek bed road, what a luxurious feeling, sitting in a quiet car without the loose gravel flying and the teeth jarring from chuck holes. How many people have done that highway now? Oh, just a few, okay. In the RVing community, it's a very popular thing to do, is to drive all the way up the Alaska Highway. But it's been paved for quite some time. However, the paved roads develop what's called ice heaves because it freezes in the winter and thaws in the summer, and it makes the pavement buckle, which maybe the gravel is better because at least they can grade the gravel road. Anyway, everything we owned, as far as I know, was in that car. We did not have an RV, we just drove the car. And 3 of us, Mom, Dad, me, slept inside that car most of the time, plus we had 2 cats. Sometimes I wonder about my parents. But look at my mom. I mean, a vision of beauty on the Alaska Highway. Me? A fashion statement. Mile 0, very famous landmark. The year was 1959. You know the significance of that?
Yep.
It was the year that Alaska became a state, and I have this medallion from when we were there. The 49th state happened in 1959. My dad was a professional photographer. His name, Tom Van Valkenburg. Remember that? It comes up again later. And he ran the camera center at J.C. Penney's in downtown Anchorage. Remember that? It also comes up later. This is how we went camping. We had a plane. That's a Cessna 180, I think. And both my mom and dad were pilots. And we would fly that plane. A plane you think of as on wheels, right? Going in a runway. This never had wheels. It had floats in the summertime and skis in the wintertime. And we would fly into the interior of Alaska. I don't know what this cabin was, but my parents knew about it, and it's right on a river. So they could fly the plane, with some food, land on the river, and we'd stay in this cabin. I remember one time that we had to shoo a bear away who had started rummaging through the supplies in there. But the best part about it, here I was, like a 10-year-old kid, and I could wander around in the forest here, and there was a possibility that where I put my foot, no other human being had ever stepped before. The idea of being a pioneer in Alaska comes into your blood when you live there. Another time we went camping, 2+ months near the Arctic Circle, because my parents had a tip that there's this deep hole in the 40-mile river where there's gold. Now that plane is not our plane. That's a friend's. We got to this spot on the riverboat. The friend flew in to bring us supplies once a week. And by supplies, I mean beer. To give you an idea of where this was, home was Anchorage. Then we trailered the riverboat to Dawson City. not to be confused with Dawson Creek. Dawson City is way up in the Yukon Territory. We launched the boat into the Yukon River and went upstream to the 40 Mile, and that's where we made camp. So this was home for me for 2+ months. And we did pan for gold. First of all, since we were from Florida, they knew about scuba diving, and they brought masks and a compressor and a sluice box so that they could get to that deep hole and get the gravel from the deep hole. You then sluice it through this thing, and then you pan it. If anybody wants to know how to pan, I can show you. There is a technique. Well, we didn't make our fortune, but we did get some nuggets, and we had some jewelry made. And I mean, this is very old, but I think it's still beautiful. That's why gold is so precious. Back in Anchorage, we would participate in local festivities. One is the Fur Rendezvous, which happens every year and hosts the World Championship of Dog Races. So this is 4th Avenue in downtown Anchorage, and they bring in all this snow and put it on the road so that the dog sleds can go. And Anchorage was an all-American city in 1960. They were very proud of that, having just became a state. I was still cold. Hunting is something that most Alaskans did. And my dad would shoot a moose once, or try to anyway, and this year I guess he was successful. And there are places in Anchorage called meat lockers where you would have the animal, butchered and packaged up, and we would eat all year long from that meat locker. Moose heart, I remember saying, was really good. Weird. All right. March 16, 1964. This was our house. We had just returned from a vacation to Florida on March 16, 1964. That was a Thursday. The next day was Good Friday, so schools were closed. It was a holiday. And my mom and dad had said, we're not going to bother going to work on Friday. We'll just tell them we're back and we'll go to work on Monday. So all 3 of us were home, which was a very, very, very good thing, because March 17, 1964 is when the Good Friday Great Alaskan Earthquake struck. Magnitude 9.2 on the Richter scale. You know, some of those earthquakes in California that have made major news in the last, dozen years or so were like 7. And the Richter scale is a logarithmic scale. So the difference between 7 and 8 is 10 times. So that means the difference between 7 and 9 is 100 times. This earthquake was 100 times stronger than ones that destroyed parts of Los Angeles or San Francisco. And it lasted nearly 5 minutes. How many of you have been in an earthquake? Oh wow, look at that. Almost everybody. So what's the experience? I mean, you hear a little rumbling, you feel a little jiggling, you see things rattle, and you go, what the? And then, oh, it's an earthquake. And it lasts, 30 seconds, 60 seconds? Well, this one, I'd been in several earthquakes before this too, and I was sitting on the couch, and it started to shake a little bit, and I said, oh, an earthquake. Oh, this is exciting, an earthquake. And then it kept going, and it got stronger and stronger to the point where my dad said, get over here. And it was very, very difficult to walk across the floor. I think I ended up crawling for part of it. And what he did, he got in a doorway and he braced his back against one side of the door jamb, braced his hands around at the other. My mom was in front of him and I was in front of her. And that's the way that we felt we were in the most secure spot. Have you ever seen destroyed homes and the door jambs are still kind of there? So that's what we did. And as we felt pretty secure in that position, I watched as our television that was on a TV stand on wheels went rolling across the floor and rolling back. And we had a hutch that had glasses and chinaware in it. And it just kind of walked across the floor, spewing everything out of it and breaking on the floor. But I was most fascinated looking out the window at the telephone poles outside, because the land undulated. So these telephone poles would go almost touch the ground going that way, and then they'd go this way and they'd snap because the wires held them from going. So it was that and snap, and I was waiting for the wires to snap and break free. But we were okay, primarily because we were in very stable ground. We lived on C Street Valley, and I haven't been back since. I haven't been back since we left in 1966, so I'm so looking forward to visiting Anchorage and finding this house, see if it's still there. 2102 Dawson Street. It's in C Street Valley, which has a creek running up it, and so the valley was carved out over centuries, and it was a nice solid gravel bottom. Gravel and maybe bedrock, I don't know. As opposed to some friends I had in school that lived in the Turnagain district, Turnagain area, which was the ritzy part of town. But it was based on a clay kind of earth. And when the clay shook, it liquefied. So these people, I had friends that told me about the fact that they literally rode their house down the hill. You know, like a ski slope, but their house was the skis. It destroyed that area. Luckily, not too many deaths, though. Very few deaths from the earthquake. The main deaths were from the tsunami afterwards. And we had to evacuate for the night, maybe a couple of days, actually. So we just drove up the hill, and what did we do? We slept in the car. We're good at that. There's the J.C. Penney building. Do you remember what the J.C. Penney building's significance is? That's where my dad worked. But he wasn't at work that day, thank goodness. Although nobody did die who was inside the building. I'm sure there were plenty of injuries, but people did see how the facade of the building was these big granite slabs, and they just fell off, crushing everything below them, which happened to be some cars and some people. That was not good. And here is 4th Avenue, and can you see that these buildings, these were stores, so their store front was fairly narrow, but the building went all the way back. See how that just cracks in the middle? What's a building supposed to do when the land falls away 30 feet underneath it? So these buildings just dropped and cut in half, which always makes me wonder when they say that you can build a building that is earthquake proof. Once again, what does a building do when the land isn't there anymore? And do you see who this photo was taken by? T. Van Valkenburg. What was the significance of that? Yeah, that was my dad, my stepfather. Downtown Anchorage, 4th Avenue, that one where the sled dogs were at the Fur Rendezvous. Can you see the people in the street? To give you perspective, so that's a person there, and that is what happened to what was a solid road. And there's just another view of it. And here is that Turnagain area where the houses literally, so this house probably started up there, and it just, landslide, liquefied. And I read one thing in this great podcast. There's a podcast about a woman who happened to have the job of reporting on current events for the local radio station. And anybody here in Hurricane Andrew in Florida? Oh, a few, okay. You remember Brian Norcross? Brian Norcross was the one voice that we all heard, even if you were locked in your bathroom and had no contact with the outside. This woman was the voice that people who were in distress in the earthquake heard. And I listened to this whole podcast, and one of the things that I learned is that when the mailman went to deliver mail after the earthquake in Turnagain, there were 150 addresses that just weren't there anymore. Seward, so all of that was Anchorage, that's where I was. Seward was primarily affected by the tsunami and the land drop, and then there were all these oil containers and they got on fire. So Seward was in really bad shape. And now I want to show you one little video.
Everything was in chaos.
I'd never seen anything that destructive that close up.
In 1964, Alaska was shaken by the largest U.S. earthquake ever recorded. Magnitude 9.2. Shaking went on for over 4 minutes. 143 people died. Total property loss in 2013 dollars is estimated at $2.3 billion. There were gaping fractures, massive landslides, and the destruction of water mains, gas, sewer, telephone, and electrical systems. The epicenter was in Prince William Sound, 74 miles southeast of Anchorage, yet effects were observed as far away as Texas and Louisiana. What the 1964 Great Alaska Earthquake taught scientists was as profound and far-reaching. Initially, no one understood how or why the earthquake occurred. Immediately, 3 U.S. Geological Survey scientists were sent to figure it out.
The main airport, the Anchorage International, was closed down because the control tower had collapsed and killed the operator.
And then we went out separately, mostly separately, to look at different things so we could cover 3 times as much ground.
The scientists studied the effects from the air, on land, and along shorelines. They were astonished to find that the surface was disrupted over an area larger than California, 185,000 square miles. Some areas dropped down as much as 8 feet, and others rose up by as much as 38 feet. Barnacles, once 2 feet below the ocean surface, were suddenly several feet above. Mapping this uplift and downdrop became crucial for understanding what happened. But with no faults visible at the surface to explain it, even with months of careful observation and fieldwork, the cause of the quake remained a mystery.
It was right at this time that this idea of plate tectonics, that the surface of the Earth is broken up into roughly a dozen different plates and that they move around with respect to each other. It occurred right at the time where this idea was being put forth.
One of the scientists, geologist George Plafker, considered the quake in terms of this newly forming theory of plate tectonics. He knew the theory had new crust forming at mid-ocean ridges, but there was no explanation for where this crust went.
And so the most likely one that came to mind is that the oceanic crust is being pushed underneath that part of southern Alaska at a very low angle, and there was slip on the interface between the oceanic crust and the overlying continental crust.
These two crusts are converging at the rate of 1.5 inches each year. Periodic slip between the crusts produces great quakes, which Plafker called megathrust earthquakes. His realization changed our understanding of these great earthquakes. Megathrust quakes are the largest known on planet Earth. They occur in areas of colliding and descending crusts, known today as subduction zones. The uplift and downdrop of large areas from these quakes is a result of the crust being compressed over years of the plates converging. It releases like a spring, which is the earthquake. Seaward areas are uplifted, while landward areas drop down. George Plafker identified this pattern common to megathrust quakes in subduction zones.
The 1964 earthquake was the first megathrust subduction zone earthquake properly interpreted as such. As a result of that, essentially every other large subduction zone earthquake around the world sort of falls in the shadow of what we learned from the 1964 earthquake.
Next, the question became, how often do these quakes happen?
And I'm going to leave you in suspense there because nobody really knows. When will the next big one happen? And these are links I'll put into our WhatsApp group. This Genie Chance and the Great Alaska Earthquake. It's about an hour-long podcast, and I just think it's fascinating. So I'll offer that. And now, so in 1966, we'd had enough, or at least I had. I'm a 14-year-old now, and the idea of going to the beach in Florida sounded a lot better than living in Alaska in the snow and ice and the cold and the earthquakes. So this was another adventure. My parents got a travel trailer, hooked it up, and we did 3 months to go all the way across Canada and down the East Coast to back to Florida. And on the way out, though, how many people have never visited the tourist attractions in their home state because, you know, why? You live there. Well, this is the main tourist attraction in Alaska, Mount Denali, or as it was known when I was there, Mount McKinley. We got to stop and see it. Most people never see it like this because it attracts its own weather. It's solid clouds, but we had a beautiful day there. And this is the rig that we traveled on the Alaska Highway again. My family actually did 5 times, drove that Alaska Highway 5 times, and never had a flat tire. But we certainly did get dirty. Did you see that? You know, driving 2,000 miles on a dirt road. Okay. But we went across Canada. I love the Canadian Rockies, Jasper and Banff National Parks, and Moraine Lake, Valley of 10 Peaks, just beautiful. All the way to the East Coast. This is the skyline of New York City in 1966. And then we're back in Florida. And like Sam McGee, I was warm. Okay. Do I dare? Alaska's state song. I apologize in advance, but I gotta give it a shot. 8 stars of gold on a field of blue. Alaska's flag, may it mean to you the blue of the sea, the evening sky, the mountain lakes and the flowers nearby, the gold of the early sourdough's dream, the precious gold of the hills and streams, the brilliant stars in the northern sky, the Bear, the Dipper, and shining high, the great North Star with its steady light, o'er land and sea a beacon bright, Alaska's flag to Alaskans dear, the simple flag of the last frontier. Okay.